Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Shakayla Alvarenga. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. In recognition of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we have the honor of hosting 3 distinguished retired FBI agents who will share their experiences investigating Asian organized crime. Our panelists here have ventured deep into the underworld of the Triads, the Yakuza and other notorious criminal organizations risking their lives to infiltrate these complex networks. They have navigated political landscapes, overcome cultural and linguistic challenges, and forged groundbreaking international collaborations. Their efforts have not only made significant strides in the global fight against organized crime, but they have also shattered barriers and paved the way for greater diversity and representation within the Bureau. And tonight we have the unique opportunity to hear their stories firsthand. To my left is Dr. Kingman Wong. He retired from the FBI after nearly 25 years of service, holding various investigative, supervisory, and executive positions. He worked undercover against Chinese secret society members, led the FBI's National Asian Organized Crime Program, and served as the special agent in charge of the Special Operations and Cyber Division in the FBI's New York office. Dr. Wong was also selected by the FBI director to serve 2 overseas assignments in Hong Kong and Ottawa, and he is the recipient of numerous awards, including the U.S. Attorney General Award and an FBI Director's Award. Sitting next to him is Carol Lee, who became an FBI special agent in 1986, serving in the Honolulu and San Francisco divisions where she investigated Asian criminal enterprises. She held leadership positions in the international operations divisions and served as the special agent in charge of the Albuquerque division. Ms. Lee holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and international studies and a Juris Doctorate from Willamette University. And sitting next to her, last but not least, is Jim Stern, assigned to several high-profile investigations, including the kidnapping and murder of journalist Daniel Pearl, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the 2001 anthrax attacks, the Osama bin Laden manhunt in Pakistan, and multiple overseas murder investigations of American citizens. Mr. Stern also conducted the polygraph interrogation of Saddam Hussein's bodyguard, and additionally, he has been involved in numerous undercover operations targeting organized crime networks. We certainly look forward to learning from their experiences and insights, and a special shout out to the FBI Las Vegas Citizens Academy Alumni Association for their assistance in organizing this program. So So usually what happens during these panel discussions is we kind of get people from all over. And what was really awesome is we told everyone who was going to be on the discussion, and they were like, oh, I know them. So I'm sure there will be a lot of great discussion during tonight's program. And again, thank you all for being here. So Kingman Wong, we'll start with you. Can you share with us how your upbringing and your early experience sort of influenced your decision to pursue a career in federal law enforcement?
Yeah, I was born in Hong Kong, and I came to the U.S. when I was about 10 years old. And when I was in Hong Kong, living in Hong Kong, I was living in the government housing estate. And at that time, there were a lot of triad activities already in those areas. And so the Triads were very active in recruiting members, and what they do is that they would target students in elementary school, because they want to start them early so they can groom them, and someday when they become in porn or maybe in the government, that they would have some control, in those areas. And so yeah, I had a pretty early understanding of the Triads and some of how they operate. My neighbor was a Triad member, and I was like, I think 6 or 7 years old, and he would show me the hand signs and the symbols and about Triad and how they operate. So I mean, it was quite interesting, and I started becoming interested in the FBI when I was doing my undergrad study. And a mentor of mine in college, he applied to the FBI twice, and he failed the test. So he can, back then, if you fail the test twice, you can never reapply again. And so he was very depressed, and he was telling me that, I mean, I'm already finishing my master, and if I cannot pass the test, there's no way that you can, and so I thought, okay.
A challenge.
Yeah, so when I was doing my graduate study, one of my professors happened to be a retired FBI supervisor, and he encouraged me to go and apply to the Bureau, and so that kind of sidetracked me because I was planning to finish my master and go to law school. Instead, I applied to the FBI, and 1 year later, I got in as a special agent.
Wonderful. And Carol Lee, it's kind of similar, but your path to the FBI was also somewhat unconventional. You were originally pursuing a career in law, and so tell us what happened there.
Yeah, I was in my third year of law school, and when the recruiter comes from the FBI, and he used to go to my law school, and he just said, look, I know a lot of you folks are here because you want to be lawyers, you want to be judges, you want to take divorce cases, you want to take whatever cases come. But if you don't want to, go ahead, finish your law degree, get your bar membership, and then come in the Bureau. Because if you don't like the Bureau, you can always go back and be a lawyer, right? And I thought, yeah, I'm kind of bored here in law school, so I can't imagine my entire career. So I did. I applied, and I joined the Bureau, and never looked back. I kept my law degree, and my bar membership, just in case, they threw me out, actually. But no, but I stayed in the Bureau, retired with 31 years in FBI.
Thank you. And Jim Stern, let's talk about you a little bit. Take us back to those early days. I know you have a story of how you also decided to be an agent too.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was born in Japan. My mom is Japanese. My dad was in the U.S. Army in Tokyo. And so I was born at the U.S. Army Hospital in Tokyo. When I was 2 years old, we moved to San Pedro in Southern California. And growing up in San Pedro, as a young child, I used to always watch all those police shows, Adam 12, Police Story, yeah. And The Love Boat, but that was something I was raised and I thought, oh my God, I'd love to be a police officer. I was thinking LAPD, LA County Sheriffs, etc. After high school, I went in the Army. I served for 3 years. I was with NATO forces overseas. I came back, and both of my sisters were good students. They were both cheerleaders, and I was just kind of the dummy of the family. They were both at USC, and I decided to go to University of Southern California as well. So after I graduated from USC, I applied to the FBI, and I got in. I was 24 years old, became a special agent. And from there, I was transferred about 10 times during my FBI career. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New Orleans, Honolulu, FBI headquarters 3 times. I did a lot of stuff overseas after 9/11. I was a polygraph examiner. I did most of the Al-Qaeda exams. In Pakistan and some of those areas. So I was all around the map. I did 25 years as an agent. And it's such a treasure for me to be up with my 2 favorite colleagues in the FBI, along with some of my colleagues out that are in the audience here. So thank you for coming. It's our honor to be here.
Thank you. And we'll get into some of that work in a little bit. So Kingman, let's get back to you. You played a crucial role in, let's start from the beginning, establishing the FBI's Asian Organized Crime Program. Can you tell us about the challenges you faced in maybe getting the Bureau to recognize the significance of this threat?
Yeah, historically, the FBI and U.S. law enforcement did not really pay that much attention to Asian organized crime, simply because it was viewed as a Asian-on-Asian crime problem, and that it did not affect anybody outside of the Asian communities. And however, in 1978, everything changed when the Golden Dragon Massacre happened in San Francisco, where Asian gang members went into a restaurant and shot up the restaurant, and in the process, they did not kill their targets. Instead, they killed 5 tourists and injured like another 11 people that were mostly tourists, and they were non-Asians. And so that kind of woke up and shook everybody up. And at that time, the FBI and U.S. law enforcement started paying attention to Asian crime. However, the mistake that they made was that they were focusing on Asian street gangs, and some of these Tongs, they are like fraternal organizations in Chinatowns, and however, some of them are good, however, some of them are criminally influenced by organized crime. And so, the focus was pretty narrow. However, then again, the FBI and U.S. law enforcement was awoken again because of 1997, when Hong Kong was going to be reverted back to Chinese rule. At that time, a lot of the Triads, the secret societies from Hong Kong, they start coming over to the United States, going to Europe, going to Canada, going to Australia. And all of a sudden, we realized, what kind of threat that we have, because Triads are very different from typical organized crime, because they're more sophisticated, they have worldwide connections, and their structures are also very different from what the FBI was used to or understood. And therefore, for a while, the FBI struggled quite a bit in investigating these groups.
And I know we have some pictures to share. So let's talk a little bit more about the Triads, one of the most notorious organized crime groups in the world. Can you kind of just give us a brief overview for people who may not know about this network, what they do, and even up to today?
Oh, sure. Let me just give you a very brief Reader's Digest history of Triads. That in the 17th century, China was invaded by the Manchurians, who invaded and took over China. And as a result, the Chinese people formed these, what they call Hongmun, which was Chinese secret societies. And because at the time, the Manchurian government was pretty much chasing after these rebellious groups. And so they have to develop these secret hand signs, secret signals, and secret way of communicating in order to avoid being detected. And so throughout the centuries, some of these groups actually came to the United States, especially during the gold rush, the Chinese coming to build the railroad. And so they brought some of that practices into the United States, and they set up these, what they call Tongs, in any Chinatowns in the United States. So and at that time, they have a lot of influence over these Chinese communities throughout the country here. And as a result, they were able to build a lot of influence, make a lot of money, smuggle drugs into the United States, and run prostitution, illegal gambling. And at that time, there was a very famous term they call axe boys. And what these axe boys would do is that they are the younger generation that are recruited by the Tongs, and they carry axes around just to go around chop down the rival groups. And that was really well known. And then you have the Tong Wars beginning around the late 1800s, and the Tongs were fighting each other, and there was a lot of bloodshed. And so as a result of that, really created a lot of issues for the United States. But at the same time, then there were also these secret practices that were used in China that was brought into these Tongs. And did I lost the question? At some point.
You did.
I apologize. I'm trying to give as brief as possible of a history.
I know. I'm like, do it in 5 minutes. All right. And so the photos that we have, maybe you can just talk a little bit more about those as well.
Okay. Oh, it's in reverse. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah, this is just this book was published by the Hong Kong government in 1960, and this is just a photograph of a Chinese Triads secret society leader. And this is what they were back decades ago, when they would have initiation ceremony to initiate new triad members into their societies. Yeah, this is just a triad initiation ceremony altar, and the guy, if you notice his hand, that is one of the hand sign for a deputy boss, or they would call them a vanguard or an incense master. And this is the number 2 in a triad organization, and who holds a lot of influence. Yeah, this is just a list that depicts the number of different triads that the Hong Kong government was dealing with. I mean, there are about 200 triads on this list. And at one point, the Hong Kong government estimated that there were about 300,000 triad members just in Hong Kong, not counting overseas. So I mean, they do have quite a bit of influence. And on this list, there are 4 most power, the big 4 most powerful triads. Right now, they're the 14K, the Sun Yon, the Woshing Wo, and the Wo On Lock. And these triads are very active, especially 14K. They're very well known to be all over the world, especially in Europe. When I used to deal with law enforcement groups in Europe, and they were having a lot of problems with them simply because they were very difficult to infiltrate, and the practices, the secret way of communication, the language differences, the cultural differences, it made it extremely difficult for law enforcement agencies to try to infiltrate into these groups. Yeah, this is just a very typical triad ranking structure. You have the dragon, the boss, dragon head, the boss on top. You have the deputy, the underboss, or vanguard, or incense master being the number 2. And under that, there's 3 ranks. These are officers. The white paper fan. These individuals that act as advisors to the dragon head or the deputy boss. And the red pole is the head of enforcement. These are the ones that would direct the members to go do assassination or go do extortions or do any criminal activities. And the short sandal, these are the communication officers, the head of communication and head of negotiation, usually negotiating with riot, triad groups. And the ordinary member, that's underneath them. And then you also have a rank called the blue lantern, or hanging the blue lantern. These are the people waiting to be initiated into the triad. But I can explain some of these numbers assigned to these ranks, because each one have a meaning behind it, and some of these titles also have a meaning behind it. I can explain that during the Q&A perhaps. These are just some of the secret hand signs of some of these triad members. And on top, you have the dragon head hand sign. Below that, you have the deputy boss. And underneath, you have the officers and then also the soldiers. So they communicate in these secret hand signs. So even when they are identifying each other in front of law enforcement, most law enforcement would know the difference. Because the way they sometimes when they shake your hands. When they shake each other's hand, what they do is that they will shake each other's hand with a hand sign. If I shake somebody's hand with a hand sign like this, then they would know that I'm a leader of a triad, and without me telling them. And so that kind of defeats body wires or wiretaps and stuff like that, because you cannot record that. And that's how they communicate, and that is usually taught once a person is initiated into a triad, and the leader will then teach them in some of these communication tactics. This is just a Tong member certificate that I received, and when they join these Tongs, these are fraternal organizations. However, they are criminally influenced, and so they once they get initiated, they go through the same triad initiation ceremony, and they would be given a certificate to identify themselves to other Tong members. And on this certificate, it also have a lot of symbols, showing that it's related to triads. So when people say, "Oh, I'm a Tong member," it's innocent. It's a fraternal organization. Not always. A lot of the Tongs have criminal influence, and they use the same initiation ceremonies as the Triad, the secret societies. Yeah, this is also something that will be given to a newly initiated Tong member. Yeah, I have the blue tape over because it has the name of the member. So, and yeah, on the side of the book, it actually says the secret book of the Hong Moon. Hong Moon is the overall umbrella of Triads and Tongs. And so it's a secret book, and it's got 432 pages. It's a good reading. I mean, especially if you can sleep. Yeah, this is just a example of what is in it. This is the 36th oath that a new member have to swear to. It's 36 oath that if they violate it, their punishment is usually death. And however, the Triad or the Tongs would use these rules to kind of legitimize themselves, because it talks about being patriotic and this and that, but I mean, they really don't care about patriotism. They only care about making money. And yeah, but then this is just an example of the 36th oath. Yeah, this is a way for them to do covert communications that on the far side, if you see those two sticks, yeah, so when they identify each other, they're maybe having dinner over a dinner table, they stick the two chopsticks over the rice. That shows that they are part of the Hong Moon secret society. And so I mean, that's how they communicate. The one with the cross chopsticks, that symbolize the word hub, and hub is one of the Triad organization, Wo Hub To, and so I mean that's how they communicate. And even with the teacups and the teapot, how they position the teacup, that will communicate a certain meaning, and that there are multiple meanings. But I can explain that maybe during the Q&A. Yeah, this is just a dragon head in San Francisco. We originally investigated him being the underboss for the Wo Hub To Triad, and we arrested him. We did a wiretap on him and his the boss, the big boss, and he was subsequently sentenced to 24 and a half years in prison. However, he cooperated with the government, and he was able to get half of the time shaved off. And after he came out, he again went back to his old way of life, and he, I mean, these guys, you figure they will change, right? But they don't. And he did murder for hire and the drug trafficking and all that. So he's been sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 20 years. Yeah, this is just the FBI executing the Chi Kong Tong, one of the biggest Tong in San Francisco, Chinatown. Yeah.
Thank you. Extremely helpful.
Oh, yeah.
And going off of kind of what you were saying there, how do you think your experience as an immigrant shaped your perspective and maybe your approach to investigating these types of networks?
As an immigrant, I mean, one thing that I realized in the early days is that these organizations is nothing but criminal organization that seeks to victimize people within their own community. There's really no social redeeming value in these organizations. All they do is that they exploit and victimize. And so I mean, it was very easy and to target them for investigation. And the advantage I had was that because I already, when I joined the FBI, I already had some understanding of these groups, simply because I grew up in Hong Kong until the age of 10, and I was already exposed to neighbors who were Triad members, and they were already showing me the way how they communicate and do things, So that really made a difference in terms of targeting them and understanding how they operate. And so it made it much more effective when I started investigating these groups.
Yeah. Carol Lee, in your early years with the FBI, now you were involved in targeting Korean organized crime groups in Hawaii, where you currently reside. Can you share any insights into the unique aspects of investigating these groups and maybe the strategies that you employed at the time?
Yeah, I think so. Early in my first assignment, actually, in the bureau was counterintelligence, and again Hawaii. But I really wanted to get into the criminal investigations because, law school, that's what I enjoyed working on. And so what I did is after I worked counterintelligence for a while, and then I went to my boss and I said, hey, I'd really like to work on the criminal side. Well, new agents don't get assigned to violent crime squads. Those are the really experienced agents. They don't get I asked my ASAC, and I asked him, okay, what else? How about the drug squad? Nah, you don't look like you'd fit in as a good drug agent. I don't think, fresh out of law school, you don't have 25 years old, you just don't look like you'd fit into the drug squad. And I said, okay. He said, but I think you can help with maybe you can help with the organized crime squad because they're doing wiretaps. And you'd probably be good at, organizing the wiretaps. I said, okay, I will help in the organized crime squad. The organized crime squad, the agents who were working it, they were actually working local gangs, local gang bosses in Hawaii. And so they said, we got this handled. We have some trouble over in the strip bars. And they're doing all kinds of things. We think, Koreans are bringing in prostitutes or human smuggling, actually. And then also, I think they're involved in drugs. Why don't you and this other new agent who also wanted to work criminal, why don't you guys do what you can with this? And so myself and another agent, our first was looking into the drug trade that was being handled, and it was crystal methamphetamine at that time that was just flooding Hawaii and parts of the West Coast primarily. It was coming in from overseas, and so where is that coming from? How is it connected? So when we first were looking at it, it wasn't, how organized was this? To kind of cut it short, it turned out that it was Korean organized crime was actually very well established, but no one had really been looking at it because of the, similar to what Kingman and Jim were looking at, is because the Chinese and the Japanese were very, very well established, right? Their law enforcement had been looking at them, but Korean organized crime, again, they were involved with the different organizations. They could move around amongst the different organizations, the different ethnic groups, but it was hard to pin them down because of what structure did they have, what ties did they have. So that's kind of how it began. Something that was interesting, though, is trying to figure out how these people knew each other, how they worked together, because it turned out that they were working together not only in Hawaii, where you think of local gangs getting together, people growing up, but it was all over the country. There were Korean organizations in Chicago, wherever there were Korean communities, these gangs, but they were all working together. But it turns out, so that's one thing that we discovered is a lot of these individuals who headed up these groups, Korean and then eventually Vietnamese gangs that organized crime that we were looking at, they grew up in the refugee camps, and then when they got settled in the United States, of course, they spread out throughout the country, and then they formed their own organizations, but they kept on having the ties together, plus the ties then back to Korea. So that was kind of the start of looking at other Asian organizations.
Yeah, and another groundbreaking investigation for you was Operation Bites Dust. Can you tell us about that too?
Yeah, so when I went to San Francisco, went on the organized crime squad, and we were looking at the Chinese organized crime. Well, one thing though is kind of interesting is I was in Honolulu and I was going to be transferred to San Francisco. And at first they thought, oh, I think you're going to work counterintelligence in San Francisco. But again, things shifted, and they said, no, I think maybe since you were successful in doing an organized crime, a RICO case in Honolulu, maybe we'll put you on this the newer forming Asian organized crime. They said, but how about going to language school? Would you like to go to language school? And I said, sure. Because my family spoke some Cantonese, and I knew how to order food, and just the basics, right? But I said, okay, that'd be great. I can learn some Cantonese, and be able to, helpful in my work, but also maybe, in my home and family. So I went to language school actually in Washington, D.C., the State Department language school, and learned Cantonese. And I thought, oh, this is great. But when because they wanted to also be able to sit on wiretaps or speak to, informants. Come to find out, it's not very good to learn Cantonese for organized crime and speak to your family, because we learned a lot of profanity. We learned a lot of, and I didn't, it's like, can't really put that in a sentence. It was a little bit hard, but anyway, that was then I went to San Francisco. But the Bites Dust case, it started as a heroin case. They were bringing in China White, the organization. But then all of a sudden, one of the sources, he was very young, but he was very influential. And it turns out that the reason we called it Bites Dust was BYTES for computer chips and heroin, because what they were doing is takeover robberies in the I don't know if you recall this, but the mid to late 90s in Silicon Valley, they were creating the computer chips, the state of the art, in these factories. And what they would do, these gangs would, instead of the heroin trade, they would do these takeover robberies. They would steal all the latest computer chips from these companies. They would go in and steal these computer chips, and then they would be able to sell them on the market for 99 cents on the dollar. I mean, they were making a lot more money than heroin even, and to some extent it wasn't as dangerous for them. And they enlisted a lot of Vietnamese gangs to do this, again, all over the country, not just in the Bay Area. So we were seeing computer chip robberies almost every week, millions of dollars of chips being stolen, because, again, they were the latest technology, and then they were being shipped overseas, basically, and getting the money for them. So what we did is, in the Bites Dust case, we were able to take down the organization, and we went from almost a computer chip robbery a week across the country to almost zero when this one organization was involved in a majority of it, again, across the country.
Oh, thank you. Jim, let's get to you. So your undercover work against the Japanese Yakuza in Hawaii was, obviously a significant achievement early in your career. So for those who may not be familiar with that syndicate, can you tell us a little bit about the group and your work as well?
Sure. So when I got promoted to be a supervisor in Honolulu, I was so happy to go to Hawaii. Everybody loves to go to Hawaii, and the Waikiki and luau's and the Danho and everything. So I go to Hawaii. I'm the supervisor of the organized crime, drug, and violent crime squad. All three were on the squad. And we started to see an inordinate number of bank robberies and all these violent crimes. And when we were arresting the suspects, they were doing this criminal activity to get a lot of money to buy very expensive crystal methamphetamine, also known as ice. And I'd never heard of that, because at the time on the mainland, the drug of choice was powder cocaine, crack, etc. But the drug of choice in Hawaii was ice. And the people that were bringing in the ice, trafficking, because ice was so expensive, thousands of dollars for an ounce. Japanese organized crime, Korean organized crime. So I was tasked with Carol to look at the drug traffickers who were bringing all this massive amounts of crystal meth ice into the Hawaiian Islands. I never thought that Hawaii had that problem, because you just don't think of Hawaii like that. So we started to work with the international law enforcement, and because I was the supervisor, I was also the only one that spoke fluent Japanese on my squad. So I was the one that had to deal with the Japanese police, the Japanese informants, and the things that we needed to translate. So I was basically doing supervisory job and street agent job because I spoke Japanese. Well, we had a Yakuza member that I was introduced to by an informant. And we did a drug transaction, an ICE transaction. I gave him $40,000 for crystal meth. And our goal was to find out this guy's Yakuza group from Japan, how are they bringing in crystal meth into the Hawaiian Islands? So when you engage a low-level organized crime member, your goal is always to get to the top. But to get to the top, you got to start at the bottom, which we did. So I was the undercover agent, and we were able to initiate what we call in the FBI a Group 1 undercover operation, which allows FBI headquarters to fund you properly. You do a wiretap, you do all these things. And we were able to ultimately identify the Yakuza group that was bringing in crystal meth into the Hawaiian Islands. In fact, there's a series on YouTube called Deep Undercover. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that before, but there's a episode about this, what I'm talking about. It's called Operation Tropical Storm. And we were able to take down the Yakuza who were bringing in crystal meth into the Hawaiian Islands. And it wasn't the easiest thing to do because the international drug trafficking, you have to be able to stay within the parameters of conducting a criminal investigation when you're in a U.S. law enforcement agency, but also has international implications. So we were very fortunate that the FBI typically has offices all over the world and embassies. They call them legal attaches. And they're the ones who liaison with the police departments from that country. So we were doing that, and then of course we were wiretapping them, and we were able to take down the boss and the subordinates in a case that was called Operation Tropical Storm. So it was something that was very ultimately productive, where we stopped the drug trafficking from the Yakuza who were bringing the stuff into the Hawaiian Islands. Now the Yakuza, the largest Yakuza group is called the Yamaguchi-gumi. They're in Kobe, Japan. They're the largest. Everybody knows Kobe. Everybody knows Kobe beef, right? That's where it came. And the Yamaguchi-gumi is based in Kobe. And then the second and third, the Sumiyoshi Kai and Inagawa Kai. Now the Yakuza have been around for hundreds of years. They're organized, they're very structured, and a lot of times they will infiltrate the Japanese society by being good to the Japanese public. If there is a hurricane, a flooding, or whatever, they're the first ones to bring food and blankets and be nice to the society. And so they're kind of like them in a lot of ways in Japan. But the Japanese police, who have been monitoring them for just decades and decades, know that they're inherently involved in a majority of the criminal activity in Japan. And when they residually leave Japan into America or other Asian countries, it's very difficult. But when they came into America, I was very lucky that the FBI wanted to pursue organized crime, major investigations against the Yakuza, because at that time, the FBI was looking at the La Cosa Nostra, the mob families in New York, the outlaw motorcycle gangs, et cetera. Those are very critical investigations. But when you bring up something new like the Yakuza, people think, what is that? What are they doing? Where are they at? Well, we were able to identify them involved in multiple criminal activities in the Hawaiian Islands, but we stopped it. And that's something that I'm very proud of during my FBI career. I was in Hawaii for about 14 years.
I want to talk a little bit about this undercover identity. What was that like for you? Can you kind of take us through that process of who you were?
Yeah. So in the FBI, they're very structured on undercover agents getting trained, getting assessed, You have to go back to FBI headquarters in Quantico, and they have a program where they give you psychological assessment, profile, and do all these things, because you're basically putting a new identity into your inherent personality trait, et cetera. And it's not the easiest thing to do because you're potentially risking your life too, especially when you're dealing with bad people. But because we're talking about the Yakuza, I was tasked to do that because I speak fluent Japanese, only because growing up with my mom and my grandmother that didn't speak any English, I was able to learn Japanese as a child. And it was what ultimately led to me being tasked to be the undercover agent. But you have to be assessed and trained by the FBI properly. It doesn't matter if you're undercover with different criminal enterprises, but in my case, it was just the Yakuza. And I found it to be, I don't want to say difficult, but a little bit alarming sometimes when you're dealing with made members of organized crime. You meet them in the hotel room. They've got weapons. You're doing drug transactions. I have the money. I'm buying the drugs. They give me the drugs. I give them the money. And the FBI surveillance team, which typically will watch you when you're dealing with criminals, they're not in the room. They're outside in the parking lot to make sure that you get in and out okay, but they're not inside. And dealing with them, it was, in fact, if you ever watched the Operation Tropical Storm on Deep Undercover, there's a scene where after I did a drug transaction with the Yakuza member, we go to dinner at Benihana's in the Hilton Hawaiian Village, and he starts taking his clothes off. You know, when you go to Benihana's, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have been there, you're sitting at a table with people you don't know, just random people there, and the Yakuza member sitting next to me after we did the drug transaction, he's getting hammered, and he starts taking his clothes off, his shirt, and he's all tatted up everywhere, and he wants me to take my shirt off. Well, I'm wearing a body recorder on my chest. And at the time, the body recorders, you have a T-shirt on, the body recorder taped, and another T-shirt. And in Hawaii, you're wearing an aloha shirt. You're not wearing a suit and a tie, whatever. And so he starts grabbing me, and the last thing I want him to do is start grabbing my body recorder. Then he's going to know I'm recording the conversation for evidence. I told him to sit down and shut up, because this family of 4 that were sitting at our table at Benihana's, you know, when a guy cooks and you got these random people, they were staring at this idiot who was taking his shirt off. So I told him to sit down. He pulled a knife on me, on my throat. And I thought, oh, okay, this operation's over, because next guy, I'm not going to let him cut my throat. But I said to him, look, I gave you all that money. Let's eat and let's go to a strip club. That was the way I got out of it. And so we go to a strip club, and he takes the money from the drug deal. And I was thinking, well, at least there's no more knife on my throat. And then he liked me, and he was eventually introduced me to his top boss, because I was kissing his ass, excuse my language, the whole time. But it's one of those things where you have to contemporaneous just adjust to whatever this scenario is when you're not really sure what it's going to be at the beginning, but you got to adjust thereafter habitually all the time. Yeah. When you're dealing with career criminals, you just have to make sure that everything you're thinking and doing is logical. And of course, when you're in law enforcement, you're trying to get evidence. So you want to make sure that the recording doesn't have you say something stupid, because when it goes to court, you're going to get slaughtered. So there's a multitude of things that you have to do when you're in an undercover scenario. The ultimate goal is to use the recordings and the transactions as evidence when they're charged. But it's not the easiest thing, especially when you're having to speak Japanese the whole time. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So let's move forward to the early 2000s. Now, as I mentioned, Jim was the lead agent to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, one of the most significant investigations in U.S. history. Can you tell us a little bit about your role in that investigation?
Yeah, so I became a polygraph examiner in the late 90s. And FBI polygraph examiners are federally trained. We go to a federal school, Secret Service, DEA, FBI, CIA, we're all federally trained. And most FBI offices have only one polygraph examiner. Now the big ones, New York, Chicago, Miami, LA, they've got 2 or 3. But most of the other offices all over the country only have one. So when you're one of one, you have to do all the exams, whether it's a person applying for a job, or a bank robbery suspect, or a kidnap suspect, or a drug, whatever. So I had to do all the polygraphs in Honolulu. Well, at the time, Honolulu was also what they call the extraterritorial office. In other words, anything that happens in Asia or the Middle East or whatever, FBI Honolulu had to respond. So I was doing polygraphs all over Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Japan, everywhere. I was just traveling like crazy. Well, when 9/11 hit, there were a lot of suspected Al-Qaeda associates all over that area, and I had to go out and do all the polygraphs. And FBI New York would come into Honolulu because they were the lead agents on 9/11, and New York was just a terrific office. And I would help them do all their polygraphs that they needed done for the Osama bin Laden search, all the associates that knew the hijackers, etc. And polygraph at that time, it's transitioned to computers now, but back then it was actually the instrument that you see. Everybody's seen Meet the Parents, right? With Robert De Niro, the machine right there, right? Yeah. So that was the way polygraph was, but now it's done with a computer on a laptop, etc. So you can move it around a little bit easier. But back then you had to bring your instrument. And when I would go through even though I had my FBI credentials and my official passport, when you go to some of these countries and you've got that, the security at the airport, they want to know what are you doing, where are you doing it, how are you doing it, etc. So it wasn't the easiest thing to enter, even as a U.S. government official employee with an official passport. So I did all those tests overseas, and I eventually got transferred to FBI Las Vegas. And I was a polygrapher here for a short time, and it was, going from all over those countries to here, and here is easy. Las Vegas, Carson City, Reno, etc. And then I'll tell you this quick story. So FBI headquarters calls me and says, hey, can you go to Italy? I go, Italy? Yes, I can go to Italy. Wow, how'd I get that? I go, no, you don't understand. Got Saddam Hussein's bodyguards in custody, and he's in Europe. And we need you to polygraph him because he passed a polygraph about Iraqi agents who were in America who are going to release a WMD, and we think he's lying. So we need you to re-polygraph him. I go, okay. So I polygraphed him. He flunked my test. Interrogated him, and he admitted that he was lying. He was just trying to get visas for his family. There were no Iraqi agents in the U.S. So luckily it was in Italy. It wasn't in anywhere else. But that was one of the significant tests that I had to do. It was in Europe. And then the other one, when I was here, I got called by FBI LA to polygraph the FBI Los Angeles supervisor who was convicted of espionage, counterintelligence. And going to another office, because LA had their own examiners, but you can't polygraph somebody that you work with or you know. It just doesn't work that way. And polygraph is not DNA perfect. It's an investigative tool. So I went to LA and polygraphed the former FBI supervisor. And then I had to polygraph his entire squad, former agents, retired agents, everybody that knew that this guy was spying for the Chinese government. So that was one of those things where I was not very popular in the FBI LA office after that. I can tell you that. But then I left the polygraph program, and my last 3 years in the FBI, I was the chief of the Asian criminal enterprise unit at FBI headquarters, which oversaw the Asian program. That was my last 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I got back into Asian organized crime. So I was flip-flopping around a little bit, but it was a good career all over. Undercover agent, SWAT team, polygraph examiner, etc. So I was all over the map.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so during this time, Carol, you were named Assistant Special Agent in charge of the San Diego division, where you, as mentioned, focused on counterterrorism efforts. Can you discuss the importance of your work in this post 9/11 era and how that was for you?
Yeah, I had the counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and intelligence squads, and that's kind of how it was broken out. Of course, there was quite a few investigations in all the field offices, but San Diego was high on the list because one of the hijackers, they went through San Diego. They were operating on there. They learned flight training, and so. But this was happening on all the field offices. But I think what was important is of course there was a shift after September 11th that the criminal operations were focused on criminal investigations, organized crime, but of course after September 11th, everything had to be focused on protecting the country against terrorists, while continuing to protect the country against everything. So just the mix of all those squads and the work that everybody was doing was then very much melded together, because we found out, that was one of the huge things, is the techniques that we were able to use in organized crime and in criminal enterprise, that really isn't the techniques that we were working on to counterterrorism and counterintelligence cases. But it was the same thing as people who were violating the laws, but really going after, the safety and security of the United States. You had to use all the techniques we had available, plus interjecting more and more the intelligence, international intelligence, as well as how we did our sources, how we did our methods, everything had to be melded together. So I think that was a period of time, again, as an ASAC in a large field office, that you saw that it was good to have the criminal experience and not have the separation, but also helping all of the squads that were under me to be able to meld together and use and learn from each other and take those techniques. So I know a lot of field offices right after September 11th. Actually, a lot of the, for example, organized crime squads became terrorist squads, because we just had to do everything we could to blanket, to make sure what was happening across the country and to find any potential threats that were going on.
Now, Carol Lee was also the first Asian woman to hold the position of special agent in charge. So I'd like to hear from you on how you sort of navigated at the time just the dynamics of working in a predominantly male field. Male field.
I love the FBI. And I have always loved the FBI. It's been interesting, and it's been a fantastic career. I became the first female Asian American to be a special agent in charge, and I got that role in 2009, and I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, place I'd never been before. Not a lot of Asians there. But it was again fascinating here. The one thing that I learned and that I've held throughout my careers in the FBI is just the opportunities of so many things that you can do. Again, I was really a lawyer out of law school, coming in the bureau, never shot a gun, didn't really know, I knew the law as far as, coming out of law school, but I didn't know really law enforcement at all. I had no background in law enforcement. So kind of learning all of that. So going from an agent, again, to actually, when I retired, I was in our Office of General Counsel. I was the only agent senior executive in our Office of General Counsel when I retired. But to become an SAC, the one thing, I got great advice from one of my ASACs, because I thought, okay, first thing you do is you got to establish yourself as an agent. And I love being an agent. I loved investigations. I loved doing, working with the people I worked with, making the impact I think I made. But then at a point in time, I wanted to help other people. You're getting older too, so you can't really maybe keep up on some of the stuff, the all-nighters in the car. So became a supervisor. But the advice I got was, don't skip any steps. Make sure you're an agent. Make sure you're a great agent. And then if you're a supervisor, do everything you can for your people as a good supervisor. Go through every steps. And to be in the bureau and going through management, there are a lot of steps. I mean, some people didn't take all the steps, but the advice to me, and especially because, there weren't a lot of Asian women going through these steps. It's like, okay, you've got to make sure that you go through every step and you do it well, because then you'll be recognized for your work. And if you put in for things, then people will recognize you. It's your reputation going through. And so that's something I tell new agents too, or people who are thinking about bureau careers is do whatever you're doing to the best of your ability. Enjoy it. You're going to have an incredible career. And then if you want to take other positions, you really have the opportunity to. Again, if you do well in work hard in what you're assigned or what you're put in initially. Like I said, when I very first started in the bureau, I was put on the counterintelligence squad. Again, as a lawyer, it's like, okay, I've seen some spy movies, but not real comfortable in all this. But that is one thing I found, that the opportunities are there. There are some barriers sometimes, but just like anything in life, you work at it, you work hard at it, and sometimes, like Jim says, you take some zigs and zags around it, but things really work out, and it really was a great career.
Thank you. Before we open it up to questions, Kingman, I do want to ask you two questions. The first is a topic that we talk, and we've had several public programs about before, but about cybercrime. So Kingman was responsible for establishing the FBI New York office's first cyber program. And so can you tell us a little bit about what that was and what kind of pushed you to start that?
Yeah, I was appointed to the New York division, New York office as the special agent in charge. When I first got there, my responsibility was for the special operations program. I had about 450 agents in that program, and at the time, we were very busy running special operations, very sensitive operations. And at the time, what I realized was that cyber was becoming a serious issue, especially these foreign countries really beefing up their cyber capabilities. And having a little bit of background in computers and cyber, I realized that the threat is not just hacking into your phone, hacking into an individual computer. It is the ability for a foreign government to hack into our national infrastructures, our energy, our water, our transportation. I mean, that can be very, very serious situations that we may be facing. So I talked to FBI headquarters. I talked to the head of the office, who was an assistant director. And I mentioned to him, I said, this is something that we really should be very serious about, because at the time, in the FBI, cyber issues will work separately. Counterintelligence will be doing some cyber cases, counterterrorism, some cyber, criminal squads will be working cyber, and there's not a lot of communication. So I mean, at times there were situations that the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. And so what I proposed was that we create a cyber branch, and that was the first cyber branch in the FBI in New York, and where we unite the counterintelligence cyber capabilities, terrorism, counterterrorism cyber capabilities, and the criminal cyber capabilities, plus the computer forensic capabilities, all under one roof, and put that into my division. And as a result of that, that happened, and we started off with 5 squads of agents handling counterintelligence, counterterrorism, criminal, and computer forensic. And we got very, very busy very, very quickly. And I think that was the first time in the FBI that we saw how much threat that we were facing. And because in the past, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and once we put everything together and start taking a big picture look at the cyber problem, we realized that, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and some of other countries and nation states, and even some of the, countries that we view as friendly ally countries, that, these things were happening, and they were attacking our national infrastructures, they were attacking our businesses, they were attacking our government agencies. I don't know if you remember that the Office of Personnel Management in the US that was hacked into, and all government employees, their classification file, these are people with top secret clearances, secret clearances, and all those files were stolen because of a computer hack and computer vulnerabilities. And so right now, if I have a question about my security clearance, I call the embassy of a foreign government and ask them about it. I mean, it was crazy. They stole about 800,000 government records, government employees that had top secret clearance and secret clearances. And it was just one of the few examples that the problems that we were dealing with. And we talk about cyber problems. You have like phishing, spear phishing, man-in-the-middle attack, and things like that. But the American general public really don't understand that the threat that another foreign nation, especially a hostile nation, can put us on our knees just with one cyber attack, and a very simple cyber attack. Probably about 80%, 85% of the attacks are phishing related, and that is when you get a email or a text that they send you a link or they send you an attachment, and you don't think twice you don't think much about it, you open it, and that's how they get your system infected. And some of our government employees did not understand that, and they were, in essence, now the system got infected, and it allowed foreign governments to come into our networks and do all kinds of stuff. When we start looking into these networks, they were doing lateral move across our network, across a lot of government networks, and stealing a lot of information and putting backdoors into these systems. And it keeps me up at night, when I know, that some of these things are happening, and especially they're conducted by nation states, and some of these nation states really don't have any goodwill for the United States. And, that's
And I want to end just by talking about the Asian organized crime program as a whole. What do you think, Kingman, what would you consider to be the most significant contribution of the Asian organized crime program to the FBI's mission? And maybe just touch upon some of the challenges too in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I can see as the immediate effect is that through the Asian organized crime program, we were able to educate various government agencies and government employees on the existence of these problems. And with Asian organized crime, the issue is not just criminal, because Asian organized crime historically has been used by foreign government to do their dirty work. And so some of these foreign government crime, there's really no distinction, that they will use these organized crime, they will use triads to go out and commit acts, in favor of those foreign government in order to hurt the United States. And a good example is fentanyl problem that we're facing right now. We have so many addicts in this country, and that is kind of sad. And we know that these precursor chemicals are coming from China, and that the Chinese triads and organized crime, they're working with these drug cartels that are sending these drugs, manufacturing these drugs, and then sending them here in the United States. And the latest trend is that these triad organized crimes have become the dominant money launderers for these drug cartels in the United States and overseas. And simply because they're able to do it so effectively and so efficiently that Chinese organized crime have pretty much dominated the money laundering business. And so you see them operating here in the United States, you see them operating in Europe, in South America, in Africa, and pretty much all around the world. And I'm so sorry to kind of divert on the topic, but the benefit is that we are able to kind of educate the government on the danger of these groups, and especially not just on the criminal side, but also on the counterintelligence side, especially when the foreign governments are using these groups to do their dirty work. I mean, there has been a lot of revelations recently that some of these foreign governments are setting up illegal police stations here in the United States, that they don't tell us about, and working with some of these Tongs and Triads, and but then I can talk for 2 days about those things.
Thank you.
It's just that by working Asian organized crime, we're able to alert other agencies about the seriousness of these problems, about the tentacles that they have, not just in the United States, but throughout the world.
Yeah. So our panelists will be here for a little bit afterwards if anyone has any additional questions. But again, thank you for being here tonight and just a wealth of knowledge from these three individuals. So a big round of applause.
Thank you.